So welcome everyone. We're really excited to host this webinar introducing you to the Biomimicry Youth Design Challenge. My name is Gretchen and I'm the program manager for the challenge. And joining me to facilitate this session is Laura Arndt, a founding director of the Global Green STEM and a consultant and lead author for our Design Challenge curriculum. Also on the call today are some of my colleagues. Lex Amore, our communications director, will be helping us field questions in the chat and just generally ensuring that we have a great event. Two of my other colleagues may be on the line as well. Deborah Ratner-Love, our program assistant, and our brand new director of youth education, Rosanna Ayers, will also be joining us today. Laura, I'm realizing you have the final presentation deck. Would you mind launching and sharing that so that we can get those slides started?
There we go.
Okay, great. So would you go to the, yeah, there we go, full screen, and then advance a couple slides through the facilitators and thank you. So before we get started, I wanted to share just a little bit of information about the Biomimicry Institute for those of you who may be new to our organization. The Biomimicry Institute is dedicated to advancing sustainable, biologically inspired design. So innovation inspired by nature. Our primary program offerings include AskNature, which is an online resource organizing biological information to inspire sustainable design solutions, as well as innovations that were inspired by nature that serve as great examples of what biomimicry can accomplish. We also offer educational programs primarily through educational design challenges, and then we have entrepreneurship programming that supports early stage biomimicry innovators. You can go ahead and advance to the next slide. So today, of course, we'll be talking about the Biomimicry Youth Design Challenge. The Youth Design Challenge is a free program targeting students in middle and high school. We created this program going on about 4 years ago now. It's our newest program and our flagship authoring for youth educators. Through this program, we provide a framework and the curriculum to introduce biomimicry as a project-based STEM learning experience that connects students to tangible real-world problems and empowers them to think about innovative, biologically inspired solutions. Like I said, we're entering our 4th year now. We've had some great preliminary impacts in student learning outcomes, particularly notable in interest in science and engineering and sustainability, critical thinking, and engagement in the learning process. Go ahead. We hope you'll all register for the challenge. If you haven't already, this will be your ticket to get access to all of the learning resources that we have to offer, many of which we'll be referring to during the session today. So if you haven't had a chance yet, we'd encourage you to get signed up so you can begin accessing those materials. And without further ado, I'll turn things over to my co-facilitator, Laura Arndt, to get us started.
Hey, thank you, Gretchen. So whoops, sorry about that. So I want to start where Gretchen left off, which is looking at the instructional storyline. That is the big instructional piece that we've got to support the Youth Design Challenge. It's a suggested sequence of lessons that you can be guided through, and we're going to be spending a lot of today and subsequent seminars taking a look at the different lessons from this particular storyline. Before we get started on anything though, I'd like you to do 2 things. One is to look around wherever you happen to be and find something that is natural that you can take a look at in an activity that we're going to do a bit later in the hour. So it's something that is living or once living. It can be your pet. It can be a flower that you might have on the table. Maybe you're by a window and so you're looking at the window and you can see something. Or maybe you're sitting outside. But just be prepared to take a look at something a little bit later. And then also Lex, could you go ahead and put that poll up? There's a poll that we'd like you to take a look at and answer. You can answer more than one of these. And we just want to get a feel for who you are, what you're interested in, what your experiences are. So we're going to give you just a minute to respond to that. And once you have that, then go ahead and start looking for something that's natural that you can be looking at later in the session. So it looks like we've got a number of people that are new to the topics. Oftentimes there's more people that are familiar with the engineering than biomimicry, so that seems to be holding. And pumpkin muffins are very important today, so we decided we needed to add a comment about pumpkin muffins. All right, let's go ahead and share that out, see what we've got. All right, and it looks like a lot of people, or a decent number of people, are working remotely. So that's good to know. We're going to have some pieces in here interspersed about how to teach remotely. So that'll be helpful. All right. We're going to go ahead and move on then. Thank you so much for doing that. It's always important to do that with students as well as with teachers. So here are the questions that we're going to be exploring. One is looking at the big picture. What is the Biomimicry Youth Design Challenge in its entirety? So you get an idea of what the big picture is. How do we find the resources? So we're going to spend some time on the website. So you can always shrink the screen that you're looking at for the webinar so that it takes up part of your screen, and you can be looking at other things on the side if that's something that you like to do. We're going to look at how to customize the challenge for your curriculum as well as for this strange classroom that we're in now. Some people are remote, some people are hybrid, some people are face-to-face, and some people are changing on a regular basis. So how do we navigate that? And then the last piece is looking at some storyline activities to get you started with biomimicry and getting kids interested in solving a climate change problem. There's a checklist that has been put into the chat box. So if you take a look in the chat box, there's a bit.ly number, or you can write this down. You'll see the checklist address come in and out of different slides throughout the time that we were together, but all of the links are hyperlinked. So as you go through, this is something that you can use to find a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about today. First thing we want to do is look at the big picture of the Youth Design Challenge. And we start that by figuring out what is the anchor for the entire challenge. So this is a great way to start with students, is to take a look at this question and have them actually dissect it or unpack it. So take a look at this and do that yourself. So what are the big ticket items that they are going to need to be able to understand in order to answer this question and to complete the challenge? So as you read through it, they're going to have to know about how nature works. They're going to have to know about how nature can help solve problems, something about sustainability problems, something about climate change. So all of those pieces are going to come into play in order to complete this challenge. At least in the last year or so, there's been still a lot of anxiety about teaching climate change, but over the last year, this quote was from 2019, but over the last year, there's even less, and with everything happening this summer, I think everybody is realizing that climate change is something that needs to be taught. But if you take a look at this quote that's from National Public Radio interview in 2019, 80% of the parents wanted it taught. And we put this particular one in here because of the polarization that's happening in our country. 2/3 of Republicans and 9 of 10 Democrats agree that climate change needs to be taught in schools. So you have permission to do that from the vast majority of parents. We're going to take a look at just a sliver of an example of a final product of a a winner for the high school this past year. I'm putting this screen up here first to, so that you can see that this particular group used some technology, some online technology to build their design with. That is not a requirement though, in order to be considered a great project. We have winners that have just paper and pencil sketches. We have winners that use craft materials with string and cardboard and paper cups. And as long as they're able to get their message across for the design and be able to explain it well, that's what we're looking for. So we're going to take a look at that. And as you do that, this is something great to start with students and have them look for what the student team is demonstrating. How are they talking about the problem? How have they brought in climate change? What about biological models? Where is that in there? How about proposed solutions? What did they actually design and how did they get there? And then how did they creatively present this? So we're going to take a look at about a minute of this particular winner.
Temperatures. The hotter weather begets even more demand for air conditioning and thus even more need for power. This in turn means more emissions and even hotter temperatures. And this vicious cycle goes on and on. It is projected that we'll have about 5.6 billion units of air conditioning by the middle of the century. For this reason, the world has already started to look into low energy consuming buildings. But we found it interesting that these buildings are still considered as conceptual or fancy due to their specialty and limited accessibility to the general public. Our team's approach is to make these eco-friendly buildings more approachable to a broader market by designing a building material rather than a building itself. To make sure that it is inexpensive and simple enough, we looked into evaporative cooling. The idea is to apply evaporative cooling on building bricks. But the problem with evaporative cooling is that it requires a water source. Even though electricity generation usually requires a larger amount of water, in arid and semi-arid climates, the scarcity of water makes water consumption a concern in cooling system designs. So our team looked into nature to see which animal will use water most efficiently. The Texas horned lizard has a unique strategy of directing every drop of water on its skin toward its mouth using capillary action. The pattern is made of narrow openings and wide channels to direct the water. Inspired by this little creature, we made tests to find which application on our brick design would be the best. During lots of tests, we learned that the capillary action works the best when there's a little bit of radius in the pattern.
All right. So if you were to show this to students, then having that discussion afterwards to take a look at the problem, talk about climate change, the biological models, the design, the presentation would be a great way to start and really inspire them because they're able to see what their end product could eventually look like. So I'd like you to go to this Padlet. So you're going to see, and I think Gretchen's going to put it into the chat box. So if you could go to the chat box, grab the address for the Padlet, and write a response on this to the question, what about the Youth Design Challenge are you curious about or interested in? All you have to do is click on that red circle, the plus sign down there in the lower right-hand corner, and a box will come up and you can be adding your comments to that. And it allows us to be able to get a little bit feedback from you. And we really wanted to give you a sample of something that you can do with students when you're working with them remotely to be able to have some interaction with them. I'm going to give you a minute to do that. And I'm going to actually...
We found that the water flows in only one direction wherever the water drop is.
Ignore that. Let's see what's happening here. Oh, wonderful. Look at that. The other neat feature with Padlets, there's all kinds of setups, formats that you can use. It's free. You can have people like them, they can rate them, they can add comments to them. So you can go through have them write one thing and then have them do a second activity where they make comments on other people's writings. Excellent. And it can just continue down and down. Great, thank you for doing that. All right. So go ahead and continue writing, and we'll take a look at those toward the end again. So let's take a look at what these design challenges are actually about. So it's divided into 5 different sections. They'll see that in the storyline, and 3 big understandings. So the biomimicry piece is in a section called Motivate. And so that's where the real foundational pieces of understanding biomimicry are, those biomimicry lessons are. We're going to take a look at those today. We're also going to introduce the beginning of investigation. So in Investigate, they are learning about climate change, and they're identifying an actual tangible, narrow problem that they want to try to solve that is affecting climate change. And then to create a solution, that last circle at the bottom, that's a combination of match, innovate, and communicate. So they're matching what they're doing with their design with a biological model. They're actually creating a 3-dimensional model from it. And then they're communicating it in a creative way. And what this makes up is what we call the mimic instructional approach. So it's unique in that Motivate is strictly a biomimicry piece to set the foundation for understanding biomimicry. And then there's this match that's in the middle. And so match is looking at the biological models with the technology and bringing those 2 pieces together. Those of you that have done engineering, Investigate seems familiar, Innovate and Communicate are probably familiar with you. Let's take a look now at finding resources on the website. So Gretchen talked to you about where to register. You'll notice up across the top, there's challenge details, there's judges, the gallery are all the videos of the winners and descriptions of the winning entries from past years. We're going to take a look at the instructor resources or the educator resources. So this is what that page looks like. So I've gone up here to the top. This is the page that says start here. So when you take a look at that, you'll notice that there's lots of places that are hyperlinked. So you can download the program handbook here. Some of the real key pieces are also hyperlinked here: the instructional storyline, the rubric, design brief, the team self-assessments, distance learning is on here. We're going to go up to, in here, we can also look at remote learning support. So we built this last March when everybody went into lockdown and all the schools closed. So this is a great place to go if you're doing anything that's remote and you want to look at more options for potentially for sharing platforms, for ways to work with documents as teams, for collaboration online. How do you actually do an engineering design when you're not sitting in the same room together? So here are some ideas for how you might do that. And also preparing a video pitch when you're not working in the same room. So again, that is under resources, educator resources, remote learning. And then the place we're going to spend the rest of the time is in this instructional storyline page. Let's try that again.
Laura, it looks like your login must have timed out. It's responding as if you're not logged in. So I think you need to quickly log in and then you'll be able to open that page.
Thank you. It's a lesson learned for all of us, right? Okay, there we go. Thank you, Gretchen. All right, you'll notice that we've put together some videos, some introductory videos. So you'll see those throughout. So here's one on the instructional storyline you can listen to. So as you're going through, all of these are hyperlinked. You'll notice there's alignments here, another place to download the storyline, information about the mimic design process, an instructional approach. Here you've got all your resources. So if you take a look at this side here, right now you're looking at resources for Motivate about biomimicry. Here are the resources for Investigate with a video introduction. Here's Match, here's Innovate, and Communicate. Okay, so all of these is where you can go to actually do those downloads. Okay, on your checklist, if you remember, there's that checklist where things are hyperlinked. One of the things I say is to create a folder when you start downloading so that you can organize things. There's also, in the Storyline coaching video, there's information about how to create, or ideas for creating a design notebook for students. So let's go ahead and start looking at how to customize it for your curriculum, for a remote classroom. We'll continue looking at that. Also looking at storyline activities that you might want to consider. Everything is aligned to standards, and this is in the Storyline. There's also links to more detailed descriptions of the alignment to next generation science standards. Just by doing the activity, you've got alignments to the structure and function, adaptation, to climate change and human impacts, and then obviously you're doing the design process. The cool part though is that here at the bottom we've noted that you can customize it. So if you're teaching chemistry, or you're teaching biology, or you're an environmental education program, or you've got physical science or life science or earth science, that whatever the standards are, that there's a way to adapt it based on what the challenge or the problem that you choose that's related to climate change, and the solution that you encourage students to work on designing. We'll be looking at that in just a little bit. Let's start though with motivate. So these are things that are on your checklist. Deciding how to introduce the challenge, that's lesson 1. Looking at some lessons that are options. We're going to take a look at AskNature.org. And then certainly you're going to be thinking about a design notebook of how students can keep all of their work organized. This is page 11 in the Storyline. So I wanted to highlight that at the beginning of each of the sections. There's a page that has the lessons summarized, and it's got a part that says getting ready. So here, there's options for going outside to teach. So you want to think about that ahead of time. There's a place for way to look for design notebooks, and also reviewing the program handout. Those are all things that would be great to do before you start the Motivate section. We're going to sample a couple of activities just to give you a flavor for what is in the Storyline that you can choose from. And everything is hyperlinked out. Again, so in this particular one, we're going to have you take just a few minutes. I'm going to show you some pictures, and I want you to consider what is the relationship between the living thing you're going to see. In this case, you've got a plant seed on the left, and the technology. So I'm going to get out of the, let's see, there we go. I'm going to get out of that and show you what it looks like that you can download. So you can actually show these cards to students. You can copy them if you're in the classroom. So I'm going to show you just a couple of them. Take just a second and look at the living thing and the technology, and think about what the relationship is, so that ideally you can define biomimicry. Here's another one. And as you're thinking and coming up with your idea of biomimicry, go ahead and write it in the chat box. If you were doing this with students, or I were doing this with students, I would have them write, what do you think biomimicry is based on these examples? So act like students for a minute. What would your students be saying based on these examples? What is biomimicry? Here's one more. Gretchen, are we getting any comments in there for defining biomimicry?
Yeah, we have some observations. Somebody identified the first one as showing cockleburs and Velcro, which is correct. That's what that example was. Folks are popping in descriptions of biomimicry as copying nature, design from nature that works for us, taking inspiration from nature to solve human problems. I'd say all of those are accurate.
Excellent, very good. So think about, if you're working virtually, how to use that chat box to get students involved in sharing their ideas. Oh, and you know what? One thing that I think we have not mentioned is at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A button, a link. So if you have any questions the whole time we're going throughout this, throw them in that Q&A place, and that way they don't get lost in the chat box. And we will be having a time at the end to answer those. And we're actually going to, even after we close, at the bottom of the hour, we're going to stay open for another 15 minutes in case there's other questions that people have that they want to talk about. So throw all those questions in the Q&A link at the bottom. All right, so other ways that you can introduce biomimicry, that's a great inquiry where they're coming up with their own definitions and then confirming that. There's, in lesson 2 and 4, there's videos that you can take a look at. You can preview them yourself so that you learn a little bit more about biomimicry. This is a great one in lesson 4, talking about the star-nosed mole. There's, in the AskNature website that we're going to look at a little bit later, there's, in the resources, there's all kinds of short videos that are called nuggets, AskNature nuggets. They're really fun to look at and really engaging for students. So we've incorporated some of them in lessons. So here's just a very basic question, answer. Biomimicry is nature-inspired innovation, where you're looking to the natural world for ideas to solve challenges facing humans. So you have found something that you have near you that is a natural object. So in the storyline, lesson 3 and 5 have students going outdoors. You can do that virtually by having them just leave their homes, wherever they happen to be, and go do something and come back and report on it. You can also bring nature in, both as the teacher and show it to students. You can have them find things and bring them in and work with them virtually that way too. If you're in a classroom and you don't want to go outside, you can bring items into the classroom. So there's a variety of different ways that you can do this. It is best if you can get them outside though. So let's take a, there's full lesson plans that are 5E organized. So those of you that are familiar with the 5E learning approach, know that that's how we've written those. So take a look at your object for just a minute and look at what structures or characteristics it has that helps it to survive. So think about just one. And then there's a sentence that you can give students, and I'd like you just to take a look at it also for how you would answer that question by looking at your organism.
And if anyone wants to share their statements in the chat, feel free to do so.
I would love to have one for a pet. So if anybody has any pets that are out there, what are some characteristics that helps your dog or your cat or your fish or your bird or your, I don't know, pygmy pig? I don't know what you might have to, what makes it a champion?
We've got one for a cat in the chat. Got another Gretchen, actually. Gretchen Polum, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right, says the cat's whiskers make it a champion at moving through tight spaces.
Ooh.
Very good.
Excellent. Is there anything on a plant? Can somebody put one on a plant, like a leaf or a flower or a tree trunk?
Orna Schroeder is offering the plant's broad flat leaves make it a champion at capturing the sun's energy.
Ooh.
Very good.
Excellent. Excellent. So this is a great thing to work with students on. It's one of the very first pieces where they're simply observing nature and then looking at it from the function side, because biomimicry is all about looking at function. So this is a really crucial step for them. All right, so another piece of an activity that's in these outdoor activities has to do with these cards. So we've copied them on to the screen so you can take a look at them. So normally you would cut them apart and they would be actually touching them and handling them if you were face-to-face together. And so take a look at whether it's your cat or whether it's a leaf, or whatever it is that you are working on. These are words that represent functions. So see if there's a function on here that matches the living thing that you're looking at. And there might be more than one.
And it could be a different one than what you identified in the last exercise.
Okay, I'm going to move to the next screen. Everybody's hopefully got an idea of being able to use those. So again, these are all functions that you're connecting to a structure. So you can be thinking also about your standards, right? So structure and function are connected. And so this is a great activity to be able to do that. And then if you want to go ahead and put in the chat box again, see if we can get a couple of responses where you say the function of blank's blank is, what word did you choose on there? So the function of, in your case, the cat's whiskers is, was there a word that you found? Or the function of a leaf is, or the function of the petal of a flower, whatever it happens to be.
And then a quick reminder that if you select all panelists and attendees in the drop-down above the message area in the chat, then everyone will be able to see your responses. We are seeing a few that are coming in just to the panelists, and so we're the only ones getting to see them, but we'd love for everyone to learn together.
Hey, Gretchen, can you do that next question on here? You explained that so well. So being able, when you take what you're doing right now, and then you connect it to technology. So
yes, exactly. So when as you're guiding your students to identify the function that something they've observed in nature is, the next step can be to think of situations in our human-made world where we need something that can do the same function. So what could be an area of human innovation or a problem that humans want to solve that could use could use solutions for that function. So ways that you might then translate how the organism is accomplishing that function to an idea for a design solution.
And this is really the very beginning of just introducing that bridge between what a living thing does and what technology does. So you're really kind of pushing the envelope to get them to that point, but you want to get them started thinking about that, because so much of the rest of the challenge is actually building that bridge so that they can make a design that's a piece of technology that is rooted in something they've observed in nature. Okay. All right, so a few other lessons that are in the Motivate section is we've got a lesson that is just introducing it through the indigenous practices. Our indigenous relatives are the originators of biomimicry. They're definitely the ones that we want to look to for being able to understand biomimicry. And so honoring the student diversity you might have in your classrooms, to be able to have students identify that might have some indigenous heritage. That would be a really positive activity to be able to do, to educate other people about where biomimicry in today's world is starting and started with looking at indigenous practices. It's also a great way to connect to culture and history if you have culture and history in your curriculum. One of the last sections that we look at is in the language or the vocabulary of biomimicry, and we do that intentionally after you do a lot of the introductory activities that we just did a smattering of. So brain research says that you want to tack on the vocabulary after they actually have the experiences, so they have something to connect those words to, so personal experiences to connect them to. So we've got several activities that have to do with getting them to understand the vocabulary, because they're going to need the vocabulary as they move into the design process. AskNature is a website that we're going to take a look at, that's going to that we use to introduce the vocabulary. And here's, I'm going to Gretchen, have you come on here in just a second. So these are a couple of screenshots that you're going to see, and I'm going to move into our website now. All right. Whoops, sorry. Let me try that again.
It looked like you had
There
it.
we go. All right.
Yeah, so as I said, AskNature is an institute, or excuse me, AskNature is a website created by the Biomimicry Institute that has tons of information about what we can learn from biology and how innovators have applied some of those understandings to solutions to human problems. So as you scroll down the homepage, you will get to a search bar. This is a opportunity to search the entire library of everything that's in the AskNature database, which includes biological strategies, so that's information about how nature works, inspired ideas, which are human innovations, so things that were created because they were inspired by nature. There's also resources, which are videos, there's lesson plans, there's all kinds of different things for learning about and teaching about biomimicry. And then there are collections, which gather together different bundles of these different content types. So if you use this search bar from the homepage, you'll be searching all 4 of those types of content. You also have the opportunity of searching within just one of them. So if you clicked on biological strategies, that would take you directly to just the portion of the database that include the biological strategies, and the search bar from here will search just that subset of the data. Just a heads up, we are in the process of doing a complete redesign of the website. We're really excited because this is such a powerful site, and we see all kinds of opportunities to make it even more impactful and engaging to general users, and especially useful for students and teachers as well. So you'll see some of the interfaces changing in the next couple months and going forward after that, but we promise it'll be even more user friendly. So so just know that things may be changing a little bit, but you'll still be able to do all of the same things, and hopefully easier and better.
Excellent, excellent. And a lot of the content, Gretchen, you've said is written by a variety of different scientists and engineers, right?
Yes, so we are in the process of building out our editorial team to add a growing amount of content, especially biological strategy content, to the AskNature database. So you'll see improvements to existing strategy records and a lot of new material coming out, especially in the form of collections around specific themes. And we're working with some great writers on that content.
Wow. So think about what you were just observing and what you have sitting close to you, all right? So, and I'm gonna type them into the biological strategies search bar. So one of them I know was cats. So if I type cats in, you can have students do that. So they were just looking at functions, right? So now all of a sudden you type in cats and you're saying, oh my gosh, this is about olfactory bulbs in cats. And here's one on tongues defy gravity and skeletons, and there's something on whiskers. Holy smokes. Let's do dogs. See if something comes up with dogs. Oh, so now you just click in dogs. So whatever they happen to be looking for, they can find different examples here, and you can have them do some activities with that. What if we put in leaf? Okay, so you see all kinds of different biological strategies that have to do with leaves. And let's do one more. Let's do a flower. Okay, so here's a whole variety of flowers and biological strategies that you can have students take a look at. So AskNature is a great way of exploring. Yes.
And if I can just interject, I want to point out one thing. There are a few different ways that you can search. So Laura's demonstrating searching by the type of organism and like, hey, what can we learn from flowers? What can we learn from cats? You could also search by function. So I want to learn how nature filters. So you could type in filter and you would get search results related to filtering across all the different taxa in the biological world.
Excellent. All right, so that students can put in different words and see what comes up. So a great way to do some research. So as we click back in here, so definitely take some time to explore AskNature. And this is an activity that's in the Motivate section where they're actually working with the vocabulary. So if you look at the bottom, some of the words, the vocabulary words that they need to be comfortable using is organism, trait, function, strategy. And in the different entries in AskNature, they have all those listed. So there's several lessons that are specifically working with AskNature to help them understand the vocabulary that they'll be using. So let's move on now to investigate. So the second part of the storyline and the mimic instructional approach is investigate, where we're looking at identifying the problem and then also starting to get some ideas about what kind of solutions are possible for addressing that problem. These are things that are on your checklist. There's a video that you can watch. We're going to be looking at aligning the curriculum to standards and to these SDGs. SDGs are sustainable development goals that were put together by the United Nations. I know more and more teachers are finding out about them, and so we want to intentionally include them here. We'll connect them to climate change and then also thinking about the materials that you might want students to use to create models. Once again, at the beginning of this one, this is on page 19, there's a getting ready page that you definitely want to take a look at to give you some ideas of what you want to do before you get started with students in this section. There's a variety of different handouts that you're going to find in the resources index, if you remember, on that instructional storylines page on the website that you can download. These are also linked in your checklist. There's a video that you can take a look at. I strongly recommend, just to give you a grounding of what you need to do to get ready. So it's a lot of the things we're talking about that you can look at again in that particular video. When you're working on identifying a problem, there's 4 big parts to this problem. One is it somehow is connected to climate change. Another is that it's relevant, so students care about it, right? So it's going to be much easier to get them to do that work if they care about it. Another is it's aligned to standards, whatever standards you happen to be covering. And then it needs to be narrow enough for them to be able to design, to create a solution design. And one of the big problems that sometimes students have is they have these problems that are really massive because climate change is sometimes really hard to wrap your head around. So it's very important to work with students using some of the tools that we've got to help them to narrow that focus of a problem to something that actually is tangible. So how do you do that? One piece that's super helpful is to make it a local problem. It certainly adds relevance to it. They care about it because it usually impacts them and impacts their communities. It's really empowering for them to design a solution to something that is a part of their community too. So giving them that ability to make that connection of what they do and seeing it in their community is very important. And the other really powerful piece is that they have personal experiences that they can access their own background information. They can talk to their families, they can talk to community members, and there's experts probably in the community that you could bring in to talk with the students and consult with them about their design, which is super helpful. All right, so we're going to do a couple of things I want you to be thinking about watching the screen. If you haven't downloaded these documents, these are definitely ones that you're going to want to do at the very beginning. This one is about aligning the challenge to your next generation science standards. So this is what's going to happen. And I'm going to show you the document here in just a second. So you're going to scan through this document that you can download. You're going to find in that document the disciplinary core ideas, or the concepts, if you're not using next generation science standards, the concepts that you are teaching in your program or in your curriculum. And then you'll notice that next to them, there's these things called SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals. So here's the deal with Sustainable Development Goals. We have included them as a recommendation because when students are focusing on climate change, and when teachers are focusing on climate change, it can be, like I said, this big, almost overwhelming issue that you don't really know where to start. And it's on the negative side, right? So it's the problem. But the United Nations has put together these 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and it's actually the positive side. So these are solutions, goals to address problems around the world. And so many of them are connected to climate change. So it's the positive way, it's the action way, it's the solution side of climate change. And so what we've done is we have put together a document. Oh, hold it, we're going to go to this one. So take a look at this document with me, and you're going to look for, as I'm scanning through it, you might have it on your desktop already, which is great. If you don't, scan through this with me and see if any of the standards that you are teaching pop up. And then notice here on the side, on the right side, these are the Sustainable Development Goals that match with that particular disciplinary core idea. So these are life science. There's a lot of life science. Inheritance of traits, variation of traits, adaptation, biodiversity and humans. Here's some earth science disciplinary core ideas: the role of water in the Earth's surface processes, natural resources, human impacts on the Earth's ecosystems. Look at all these Sustainable Development Goals that are fit into that one. And then in the physical sciences, your structure and properties of matter, forces and motion, and types of interaction, definitions of energy, conservation of energy, electromagnetic radiation, information technologies. So these are all disciplinary core ideas that are related to climate change and are then connected to your Sustainable Development Goals. Okay, so from there, then another document that you can take a look at is, all right, so I'm going to work on, these are my disciplinary core ideas that I want to focus on. These are the Sustainable Development Goals that are connected to climate change. So I've got that figured out. What do I do with that information? All right, so there's another document here that you can download, and it's connecting those two things together. So there's a lesson for students to make that connection. So what you've got here is so each of these is a sustainable development goal. And what we've done is we have listed a couple of links that you can find online that are explaining the connection between climate change and zero hunger, or the connection between climate change and clean water and sanitation, the connection between climate change and responsible consumption and production. And you can find many more online. So you just simply Google what the Sustainable Development Goal is and put climate change, and you're going to come up with a whole variety of links that you can reference. So those are things that you can have students actually take a look at and read, to learn about those connections, and it will help them to understand the issue, the problem, and it'll also help them to come up with some ideas for solutions. So that's what that document is. There's some videos for you to preview so that you understand more about the Sustainable Development Goals. This is a really fun video for you to show students. It's called We the People. This is another one from the, that's an interview with the United Nations Secretary General talking about why climate change is so important. He calls it the defining issue of our time, and this is the defining moment. And so it's a great way to really inspire students to use the Sustainable Development Goals to address climate change in their designs. There's, this is a collection of lessons that students can do. You might recognize some of these. There's a criterion constraints document that you can work with students. It's a handout, a problem analysis sheet. 5 whys to the root cause is super valuable. If you haven't tried that before, I strongly recommend you take a look at it. And then another document over here is about smarter. So you might have heard of SMART goals. So this is smarter goals because it includes ethics and relevance in them. So take a look at those, and those are all lessons that you can use. We're going to close out by taking a look at the rubrics. So again, the big picture, coming back to the big picture. So there's a challenge rubric that you can use with your students. It's what will be used by judges if you submit your challenge. And there's a team self-assessment that is in the handouts for students in the innovation section or Innovate section. They are perfectly aligned. So what you see in the rubric is going to be also in the self-assessment. And these are the big categories. So there's a problem definition that they're working on, the biological models, the iterative or repetitive design process. You're not just going to go through it once. There's a proposed design solution and communication and presentation. And then if you've done the challenge before, our awards or recognition is looking a little bit different this year. We've really thought through what we feel like is most helpful for students and a way of really honoring the strengths that different projects have. And the first, second, and third place just wasn't capturing what we wanted to be able to honor. And so we've regrouped them and we've aligned the awards to go with these 5 categories that are on the rubric. So there's an award for problem definition. There's a naturalist award that's showing that they really understand those biological models. There's a design cycle award where they're trying again and refining and refining, and we're looking at that they really understand that engineering design process as the cycle. A change maker award. So somebody maybe is going to come up with something that you're like, oh my gosh, that is something that we really need to share and highlight because that potentially could be something that we would see in our future. And the Storyteller Award is the ability to creatively share the process that you went through. These are some comments from students, or no, excuse me, from teachers. So as you're reading through that, Lex, could you go ahead and share that first poll? We'd like to get just a little bit of information as we wrap up, and I'm hoping that if you've got any questions, go ahead and complete the poll. We've got a couple of them that are going to pop up. And then also write any questions that you have in the Q&A box so that we can take a look at those here in the next few minutes. So this one is looking at, now that you're prepared to get started, what are you thinking? You're thinking that you might try to do this in pieces or in parts, in whole. I know I've seen that some people are parents, some people are students that had registered.
Maybe I might take a moment now while those polls are running to answer a question from that came up in the Q&A. Does that sound?
Yeah, that'd be
like
great.
a good use of our time?
Yeah.
So there was a great question from Ella. Why is it important to distinguish between biomimicry and biomorphism? And I thought I'd address that. I'm not sure how many of you have heard those terms before. They are, well, we're talking about biomimicry, so you've heard that one, but the term biomorphism may be new to some of you. Biomorphism refers to things that look like nature. So something that has the form or shape that is reminiscent of something from nature. So we do provide definitions for both of those because it's an important distinction for you to be able to make as you're providing feedback to your students. There is a common misconception sometimes that anything that looks like nature is biomimetic, and it's important to focus on that function. Is it working like nature? So things that are biomorphic look like nature, things that are biomimetic work or function the way nature does. Sometimes those two things go together because oftentimes the shape or form of a particular part or characteristic of an organism is what gives it its function, but they're not always going to show up together. So it's important to understand the distinction there.
I think one of the examples, Gretchen, that we've used before is a race car that was painted like a cheetah. Is that right?
Right.
So
that looks like something from nature, but it's not going to go any faster because it looks like a cheetah.
Very good. All right. So there's another question up. Go ahead and answer this. And actually, let me explain this for just a second while, and Gretchen, if there's other questions that are coming in, then we'll answer those in just a sec. So we're looking at a series of other educators support sessions over the next few months between now and February. When are submissions due, Gretchen? If people want to submit?
Yes, so we do the submission process and the awards process once a year. So submissions are due April 1st. And then we do a multi-week review process that actually includes coaches or educators as part of that process. So if you submit projects for consideration for awards, we'll ask you to be part of reviewing projects that other educators have submitted on behalf of their students. It's usually something that folks really enjoy doing and helps them think about new and different ways to facilitate the project in the future, and it's just part of the sort of learning experience. That process helps us narrow down to the top projects. We do a numerical scoring rubric, and then we have a VIP panel of biomimicry experts and educators that will select the award winners. So usually we're done with that process by about mid-May.
So when you think about, oh my gosh, I have to be a part of the selection process, it actually is super valuable because you get to see what other people are doing, and it helps you to actually teach better and to guide your students because you can see what other students have done, both on the strength side as well as maybe how they could improve. And so it's actually really valuable for you to be a part of that process. All right, so the types of sessions that we're taking a look at doing over the next few months between now and, let's say, February, is to do a few more that are like this, where it's really giving you a lot of information about what to do to get ready for this section, things for you to actually think about. So we're just calling those getting ready sessions, and it's much more of us giving you information and creating these checklists so that you can get all your pieces and parts together to get started teaching. We really wanted to include some interactive sessions though for teachers that were interested. So that's what we've got there with number 1, where it says guided peer-to-peer conversation and collaboration sessions. So that would be where we'd be able to go into a little bit more depth in some of the different parts of let's say, in this case, motivate and investigate that we didn't have time for now. And then there would be an ask to do or a discussion question, and we'll send you into breakout rooms with a small group of other teachers to be able to have a conversation and share your ideas, and then come back together to problem solve things that you might have had or to share ahas that you've had. So much more interactive to really help address questions that you have, to give you a little bit more in-depth information about those particular sections of the challenge. So those are the 2 different things that we're looking at as you're trying to answer that. Okay, and I think we are I know we've got at least one more question, and then we're about out of time, Gretchen. So is there another question we can add?
Yeah, so actually I was just about to type and answer this question, but I'll go ahead and answer it live. Nikki asked, what is the difference between biomimicry and creating genetically modified organisms? Would you consider the 2 similar? And this is an area that not everyone agrees in, but you know, there's a clear relationship and overlap, right? So bioengineering is looking for solutions through biology, right? So biomimicry is also looking at biology for solutions. Bioengineering, is creating new or modified organisms to do something that humans want. There are some experts that think that's very risky and potentially dangerous for ecological health and biodiversity. Other people argue that this type of technology may be one of the best ways that we could get to biomimetic solutions, because there's a lot of things that biological systems can do that humans haven't figured out how to do yet. So it's an area of controversy in the field, but they are related. One other bio term I'll throw out just by way of explanation that we do use with the Biomimicry Institute. So I mentioned biomorphism, things that look like nature. Bioutilization is another term that we use to distinguish between and among different bio fields. So bioutilization, as you might gather from the term, is using things that are biological in origin. So that could be materials or products of organisms or organisms themselves. So bioengineering is a type of bioutilization. There can be times that that's done for a sustainable and ultimately biomimetic end, but again, there's potential ethical and safety considerations or trade-offs that folks would want to consider.
Couple other questions, and I know we are at about at 6:30, so we want to honor your time. So if you need to hop off, you are welcome to do that. We're choosing for all of our sessions to just stay open for an extra 15 minutes, just for question and answer. You're welcome to stay with us if you want, just to see what's there. It will be recorded, so you can always go back in the recording at the end and see what questions and answers happened. But just know, and even if you have something that's very individualized and you wanted to stay on and ask something specific to your situation, we'll be glad to stay on until everybody's satisfied. So with that, let's go ahead and answer a couple more questions.
Anonymous asked, does the design picked by the student have to be an original, untouched idea? I would say no, unless they knew that it was somebody else's idea and they took it. So we're really looking for evidence of learning and evidence of creativity, and we understand that oftentimes multiple people will come up with the same great idea. But if it looks like the student was just copying information they found elsewhere and weren't bringing their own unique thinking and problem solving to it, then that would probably be something that wouldn't advance in the awards process.
I think the other piece to that, because we've had lots of discussions about this, so that's a great question. With these students, biomimicry is brand new, and sometimes the engineering design process is super brand new. And so something that, to somebody like Gretchen, who lives in this world, has been talked about and designed many times over, could be brand new, and probably is brand new to these students. And so so taking a look at it, and really the key is that they're working through the process, and they're demonstrating that iterative design process and bringing the biological models in to defend what they have decided to have in their design. So we're looking for really putting those pieces together. And so the uniqueness, sometimes this is going to happen by chance. So yeah, I think just support the students in being as creative as they can.
Absolutely.
Have all the other questions been answered?
I don't see any more in the queue. Oh wait, one more came in.
There was something about Australia. Did somebody?
Oh, I answered that privately. Someone asked if we'd be running the challenge in Australia, and I clarified that we're accepting entries from anywhere in the world now. Previously, we were just running the challenge in the US, but this year we are able to accept entries from abroad. So please join us.
Exciting, actually. Yeah. Well, I think we've got people from India and yeah, many different countries. So that'll be fun to see.
One more question popped in. Is there another place for students to submit a project around biomimicry that is not climate change based? in the future, perhaps, for the through the Youth Design Challenge. Currently, right now, the design brief for the challenge is centered on climate change. That may be something we change in the future. We're looking at some different options. But right now, through the Institute, that is the thematic requirement of the challenge. At this time, off the top of my head, I'm not aware of other biomimicry specific youth challenges, although there are other youth, engineering and sustainability challenges out there, and I would imagine that you could submit a biomimetic solution to those. So it would be worth looking into other challenges that are out there, and I'd love to hear from you if you do submit, because maybe to another challenge with a biomimicry idea, because maybe there would be an opportunity for us to connect with the organizers there and provide some other resources to support folks doing more biomimicry in more places. So,
What also I want to add to that is that climate change, again, it's just like this massive thing, right? It's this massive issue. And so you can take the word climate change out and just say, we're going to do something that has to do with water. We're going to do something that has to do with hunger. We're going to have something to do with healthcare. We're going to have something that has to do, they're designing structures. And all of those have a connection back to climate change. If you take a look at that one document, remember, that is looking at the Sustainable Development Goals and climate change. So look at the Sustainable Development Goals as you're going through and see if there's one of those that fit. And then oftentimes it's very easy to make that connection backwards into climate change.
Yeah, in many cases, climate change is creating some of the criteria and constraints by which we need to do almost anything, right? So, there are new and different threats to buildings in certain regions of the world because of climate change impacts that are expected. So it's really a very wide open field for innovation.
Yeah.
So, the last question I'm seeing in here is, can students work with a lab for their project? And I would say, sure, we really encourage student teams to connect with experts in their local area if they can for support. So, we want to see the students doing their own work and their own thinking, but absolutely connect them with other expert adults to guide them and help them test and refine their ideas.
And that actually, in the rubric, again, if you've done the design challenge in the past, there was something in the rubric that now has become much more intentional this year, and that is doing what Gretchen was talking about, which is connecting with experts. So we really want students to take advantage of building a bridge with experts in the field. And it could be people that just know a lot about a particular problem that you're trying to solve. It could be people that are trying to solve that particular problem. So so we've called that out in the rubric and in the team self-assessment. We've described it in just saying that students are connecting with people that are experts and stakeholders in the problem and solution that they're working on. So working with a lab, that'd be fantastic. Just don't let the lab do the work.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right. Well, this has been a great turnout and great session. I'm so glad to have had the opportunity to share this program with you and look forward to seeing your student work. You can reach Laura and I at the respective email addresses if you have any questions and follow up to the session. And again, of course, there's a wealth of information on the Youth Design Challenge website. We hope you'll check out and let us know how everything goes.
Yeah, and we'll let you know about the upcoming sessions.
Yes, yeah, there'll be information going out about planned follow-up sessions for coach support, and we'll also be sending out information where you can access the recording for this session if you'd like to review it later.
And one last question, and then we're going to sign off. It says, is there a one submission project, or can students have more than one? Yowza, if students want to design more than one, I don't know that that's ever happened, but.
We can accept multiple entries from an educator who's working with multiple teams of students, but at this time it's one project per student team.
And also the other thing that now that teachers are starting to do this particular project with classes, you might end up with, I don't know, 6 to 8 projects in a class. And so we would ask for submissions to, for you to do some of the prioritizing and submitting only the ones that you feel like are at kind of that really higher competitive level. So having what's the right word, Gretchen?
Sort of a screening process in the classroom. And, you know, one way to do that probably feels a little more rewarding than just like, you know, picking your favorites would be to have, I mean, again, I guess COVID makes this a little complicated, but there could be creative solutions, but have some kind of showcase where all of the students get to share what they've created with their school community or the wider community in some way. And, you know, that could even be structured as around a voting or nominating process of which team should represent our classroom in the challenge. So there could be ways to organize that screening process where you still get to celebrate everyone's contribution.
And one more question. You guys are still out there. I'm impressed. Can there be one student in a team because of remote homeschooling situations?
We do define team as at least 2 students working together. We do think the teamwork aspect is really important, especially because biomimicry is a very interdisciplinary field and takes a variety of different kinds of expertise. So we really want to encourage that collaborative, different learning styles, different thinking styles, collaborative aspect of the challenge. So in a homeschool situation, you know, I would encourage finding other students that are homeschooling and collaborating remotely together on a project.
Mm-hmm. Remember, when you go into the website, there's a whole under educator resources. There's a whole section on working remotely and how you can actually have students that are in different houses, in different spaces come together. And so take a look at that to see how that can actually happen. And you'd be surprised, middle schoolers and high schoolers, they have many ways that teachers don't actually even know about from how to connect virtually and be able to work together. And at college, you know, all the college students are doing the same thing right now. So it's a great skill to figure out.
Yeah, and I'll say another one of our other attendees, Catherine, commented on that question. I found that my students embrace collaboration, especially while working remotely. So, you know, I think everyone's looking for connection one way or another, right? So, yeah.
All right, Gretchen, quick before.
All right. Thanks everyone for the great questions and for joining us today. We look forward to staying in touch.
Yeah, and email us if you have any other questions, and maybe we'll see you next month at our next session.